Picture Rome in the year 60 BC. Master of the world, they called her. Mistress of nations. But look closer, past the marble and gold, past the triumph parades and gladiator games. What do you see? The air itself was thick with corruption. You could smell it in the forum, mixing with the smoke from sacrificial fires and the unwashed crowds. Senators who'd never held a sword buying votes with grain and games. Veterans begging in the streets while their commanders built palaces that reeked of Egyptian perfumes and foreign spices. The mob howling for blood while the rich counted their coins behind guarded walls. 3 men saw this chaos and decided to carve it up like a feast day pig. They met in secret, these 3 wolves, called themselves allies, but each was already sharpening his teeth for the other's throats. Now, understand, I wasn't privy to their private meetings. I was just a centurion then, sleeping in barracks and eating soldiers' bread. But word spreads in the legions like fire in dry grass. We heard the whispers from their slaves, caught the worried looks of their bodyguards, pieced together the truth from a dozen small betrayals. First, Marcus Crassus. Picture a spider in senator's robes. The richest man in Rome, they said, though his wealth came from other men's misery. Fire brigades that wouldn't work till you paid. Slave armies that crushed revolts. Blood money, every denarius of it. Even standing near him, you could smell the fear that surrounded him like a cloud. Fear of losing what he'd clawed together from the ashes of other men's lives. The story we heard in the barracks was that Crassus spoke in that smooth voice of his, like silk over steel. Gentlemen, Rome has grown too large for the old ways. The Senate squabbles while the world burns. Perhaps men of vision should guide her future. Then there was Pompey the Great, and by the gods, he never let you forget that title. Tall, golden-haired, handsome as Apollo and twice as vain. I'd seen him up close during his triumph parades, watched the way he preened before the crowds like a peacock showing his feathers. The perfumed oil in his hair caught the sunlight, but it couldn't hide the petulant twist to his mouth when senators didn't grovel enough for his taste. I've brought more gold to Rome's treasury than any man alive. He would boom at anyone who'd listen, wounded pride dripping from every word. I've made kings kneel, yet these toga-wearing sheep treat me like a common soldier. The third wolf was different, younger, hungrier. Gaius Julius Caesar, lean as a blade, sharp as winter, with eyes that missed nothing and forgot less. I'd caught glimpses of him before Gaul, moving through the city like a hunter, stalking prey. There was something about him, the way he smiled when others sweated, the way silence followed in his wake like a held breath. Even a common soldier could see the ambition burning behind those calculating eyes. Years later, I learned what he'd supposedly told them that night. My friends, why should we compete when we could collaborate? You have gold, Crassus. You have glory, Pompey. I have potential. Together, we could reshape Rome herself. And just like that, the Republic's fate was sealed over wine and whispered promises. They called it an alliance. I called it a funeral pact. Caesar took Gaul as his prize, the wild lands beyond the Alps where painted savages worshipped trees and sacrificed prisoners to their bloody gods. A quick campaign, the Senate said. A year, perhaps 2. 8 years later, we were still there, and I can tell you, Gaul leaves its mark on a man. The forests smelled of wet earth and decay, mushrooms and blood. The rivers ran cold enough to steal the breath from your lungs. In winter, your breath froze in the air before it left your mouth, and the Gallic winds cut through wool and leather like they were silk. I was there at Bibracte when we first faced the Helvetii, 100,000 barbarians streaming across the land like locusts. The ground shook beneath their feet, and you could taste the fear in our ranks. Salt and copper, like blood in your mouth before a bad tooth comes out. Most of us had never seen so many enemies in one place. I remember a young soldier beside me, his knuckles white on his pilum shaft, voice shaking as he whispered, "Centurion, there's so many of them." "Aye, lad," I told him, spitting to clear the dust from my throat. "More enemies means more glory to go around. Keep your shield up and your gladius sharp. Let the barbarians worry about our numbers." Caesar, though. Caesar saw opportunity where others saw disaster. He didn't just want to defeat the Gauls. He wanted to break them so completely they'd never rise again. I watched him before that first great battle, moving among the men with that peculiar grace of his, touching shoulders, speaking quietly to officers. The morning mist clung to his scarlet cloak like the breath of ghosts. "Gentlemen," his voice carried that cultured certainty that made men believe impossible things. "Rome didn't build an empire by being defensive. We attack at dawn, hit them hard, hit them fast, and show these painted savages what Roman steel can do." We won that day, and the next, and the day after that. Caesar had a gift for war like other men have gifts for music or poetry. He could read a battlefield like a scroll, see weaknesses where others saw strength. But the Gauls, they learned. By the gods, they learned fast, and they found a leader to match our Caesar, a young chieftain named Vercingetorix, tall as a tree, fierce as a wolf, with a voice that could make dead men rise and fight again. I heard him once, across the battlefield during a parley. Even from a distance, you could feel the power in his words, the way they rolled across the field like thunder. The very air seemed to vibrate with his conviction. "Romans, you bring chains disguised as civilization. You offer slavery and call it peace. But we are free men, and free men bow to no master." The sound that followed. By Mars. I'll never forget it. 100,000 throats releasing their fury at once, like the earth itself had found its voice. It made your bones shake and your teeth ache. He united them, Arverni, Aedui, Nervi, tribes that had been cutting each other's throats since the world was young. Under his dragon banners, they became something new, something dangerous. The siege of Gergovia nearly broke us. The siege of Alesia, that's where legends were born and died. Picture it, a hilltop fortress, unassailable, filled with 80,000 Gallic warriors. And Caesar, mad, brilliant Caesar, decided to build not one wall around it, but two. One to keep the Gauls in, another to keep the relief army out. The work was back-breaking. My hands bled through the calluses from swinging picks in the rocky Gallic soil. The dust got into everything, your eyes, your mouth, your food. At night, you could taste grit between your teeth and feel it grinding in your joints. The smell of fresh-turned earth mixed with sweat and leather, the scent of an army digging its own salvation from the ground. A veteran soldier came to me during the construction, exhaustion written in every line of his face. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders all day. "He's lost his mind, Marcus. We're going to starve before they do." "Maybe," I replied, wiping mud from my hands on my tunic. "But I've followed Caesar through 8 years of impossible victories. If any man can pull eagles from the sky, it's him." For weeks we dug and built while Gauls howled curses from the walls above. 12 miles of fortifications, ditches lined with spikes, walls topped with stakes, a masterpiece of Roman engineering and stubborn, bloody-mindedness. When the relief army came, 250,000 screaming barbarians covering the hills like a plague of locusts. We were ready. The ground trembled under their approach like an earthquake made of flesh and bronze. They attacked from all sides, inside and out, like a nut in a hammer's grip. For 3 days, Roman steel held against Gallic fury. The air was thick with dust and blood, the screams of men and horses. Your throat went raw from shouting, your arm numb from wielding your gladius, but still you fought. Then Caesar himself took the cavalry and struck like lightning from the north. "Today we finish this," he shouted over the battle din, his voice somehow carrying above the chaos. Today Gaul becomes Roman. Charge! By sunset, it was over. The relief army scattered like leaves before a gale. Vercingetorix surrendered to save his people from slaughter, rode out from Alesia in his finest armor, threw his weapons at Caesar's feet with a dignity that even we Romans had to admire. Caesar had him dragged back to Rome in chains, kept him alive for 6 years just to parade him in his triumph, then strangled him in the Tullianum like a common criminal. It was the one moment I saw Caesar choose cruelty over mercy, and it told me everything I needed to know about what he was becoming. While we bled in Gaul, Rome was tearing herself apart. Crassus had taken his legions east, hunting glory among the Parthians. Pompey strutted around the forum like a peacock, collecting honors and enemies in equal measure. And the Senate finally remembered they were supposed to fear their own generals. News reached us in Gaul like a physical blow. The messenger who brought it was half dead from riding hard, his horse white with foam and exhaustion. Crassus, the spider, the moneylender, the richest man in Rome, was dead. Not in his bed, surrounded by gold and slaves. Dead in the Syrian desert with 20,000 legionaries, butchered by Parthian arrows and their own arrogance. They say the Parthians poured molten gold down his throat. Here's your thirst for riches, they mocked. Whether that's true or soldiers' talk, I'll never know. But I'd seen enough of Crassus to know he probably deserved whatever he got. The first triumvirate was broken. 2 wolves remained, and now there wasn't enough world for both of them. The Senate saw their chance. Pompey they could control. He was vain enough to be flattered, proud enough to be manipulated. But Caesar was in Gaul with 8 battle-hardened legions and a reputation that made kings nervous. Now, I wasn't there to hear the debates myself, but soldiers talked to slaves, slaves talked to freedmen, freedmen talked to citizens. Word travels from the forum to the camps faster than you'd think. The story we heard was that Cato the Younger had stood before the Senate like an ancient statue come to life. I'd seen Cato once, years later, and there was something about the man, rigid as iron, uncompromising as winter. He had the kind of principles that make other men uncomfortable, the kind that get you killed. But by the gods, you had to respect him for it. When he spoke, even the crooked senators fell silent. "Conscript fathers," he supposedly declared, his voice cutting through their chatter like a blade through silk. "Caesar has exceeded his authority. His command has expired. He must return to Rome as a private citizen and answer for his crimes." Then there was Cicero. Cicero. I heard him speak once, years before the wars began, during some festival or other. Even a common soldier could appreciate that golden voice of his. He could make words dance in the air like sword work, make you believe things you'd never thought of before. When he spoke of liberty and law, you could almost see the old republic standing proud again, cleaned of her rust and corruption. The republic cannot survive another Sulla. The word was, he told them, that famous voice carrying conviction like wine carries warmth. We must act before ambition becomes tyranny. Orders came north on the winter wind. Caesar was to disband his legions and return to Rome defenseless, face trial, submit to the judgment of men who'd never held a sword or faced an enemy charge. Caesar read those orders in his tent while snow fell on our winter camp. The brazier cast dancing shadows on the leather walls, and I could smell the wood smoke mixing with the oils he used on his armor. I was there, polishing his gear, when he laughed, a sound like winter ice cracking under pressure. "Gentlemen," Caesar told his officers as they gathered in the command tent, "it seems Rome has grown too large for conquest. They want their general to come home and beg forgiveness for making them wealthy beyond dreams." The tent reeked of nervous sweat and lamp oil. Outside, you could hear the camp stirring, 8 legions worth of veterans who'd followed Caesar through hell and come out victorious. We knew what his words meant. Every centurion, every scarred soldier who'd shed bread and blood with us. We knew. The march south was strange. No singing, no jokes. Just the steady tramp of hobnailed boots on frozen ground and the creak of leather and bronze. The air was so cold it burned your lungs, and every breath came out in white puffs that disappeared like ghosts. The Rubicon, a nothing little stream marking the boundary between Gaul and Italy. In summer, you could step across it without getting your ankles wet. But cross it with an army, and you were an enemy of the state. Cross it, and there was no going back. Caesar sat his horse at the water's edge for a long moment. Behind him, 8 legions waited in the grey dawn light. Ahead lay Rome, and civil war, and the end of the world as we knew it. I was close enough to see his face, the way his jaw tightened, the way his knuckles went white on the reins. For just a moment, he looked like what he was, a man about to throw dice for the fate of the world. "Alea iacta est," he said quietly, but somehow every man heard it. The die is cast. The water was shockingly cold, even through leather boots. It soaked through wool and linen in heartbeats, turning your feet to blocks of ice. But we followed anyway, because Caesar had never led us anywhere but to victory. That's how the Republic died, friends. Not with the crash of thunder or the roar of an earthquake, with the splash of horses' hooves in a shallow Italian stream and one man's decision that he'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. They asked me if I knew, that day at the Rubicon, what we were unleashing. Did I know we were marching toward the death of 500 years of Roman tradition? Of course I knew. Every man in those legions knew. But we followed anyway. Why? Because Caesar had led us through 8 years of impossible victories. Because he'd made us rich with Gallic gold and famous with Gallic glory. Because when you've bled alongside a man, watched him share your dangers and your triumphs, you follow him into the mouth of hell itself. The civil war was coming. Pompey would rally his legions. The Senate would scream about liberty and tradition while they sharpened their knives. Blood would flow in the forum, and eagles would war against eagles. But that cold day by the Rubicon, as we marched toward Rome with winter mud clinging to our boots and rebellion burning in our hearts, we still believed we were saving the Republic. We were wrong, of course, but God's help me. We were magnificent in our wrongness. They say fortune favors the bold. Lying poets, the lot of them. I've seen bold men die screaming while cowards live to collect their gold. But Julius Caesar made his own fortune until the very day it abandoned him. The Ides of March, 44 BC. The morning air was thick with the smell of bread baking and incense burning, Rome waking up to another day of empire. But underneath it all, I could smell something else. Fear. Sharp and acrid, like metal heated too long in the forge. I should have known something was wrong when the soothsayer grabbed Caesar's arm outside Pompey's theater. "Beware the Ides of March, Caesar!" the old man cried, his fingers digging into Caesar's sleeve like claws. His breath stank of wine and desperation. "The gods speak in blood and omens." Caesar shook him off with practiced ease. "The Ides of March have come, old man." "Aye," the soothsayer replied, spittle flying from his cracked lips. "Come, but not yet gone." But Caesar was drunk on his own legend by then. Master of Rome, conqueror of Gaul, victor in a civil war that had painted the Mediterranean red. He walked into that Senate house like he owned the world. In a way, he did. That's why they killed him. After we crossed the Rubicon, it took 18 months to break Pompey and his allies. 18 months of Romans killing Romans while the world watched and wondered if we'd lost our minds. Maybe we had. Cities fell like grain before the scythe. They opened their gates rather than face Caesar's veterans. The spring air carried the scent of blooming almonds and fresh grass, but underneath it all was the smell of fear, sharp and metallic like blood before it's spilled. We'd brought Gallic gold and Gallic terror back with us, and nobody wanted to test Roman steel against Roman walls. "You see, gentlemen," Caesar told his officers as we accepted another city's surrender. The satisfaction in his voice was as warm as mulled wine. "The people remember who filled Rome's treasury. They remember who brought glory to the eagles. But Pompey wasn't finished. He took his legions east to Greece to gather strength among Rome's allies and client kings. Traditional strategy: use Rome's empire against Rome herself. Caesar had other ideas. Dyrrhachium nearly broke us. Pompey had chosen his ground well, a fortress city by the sea, supplied by his fleet, defended by veteran legions. We besieged them, and they besieged us right back. For months, we ate roots and leather while Pompey's men dined on Egyptian grain. The roots were bitter as wormwood, and the boiled leather tasted like nothing, which was a mercy, considering what we were eating. My boys started joking that we'd conquered the world just to starve in a Greek ditch, but the jokes came out hollow, bitter as the bark we stripped from olive trees. You could smell the hunger in the camp, sour sweat and empty bellies, the reek of men slowly wasting away. Dysentery ran through the ranks like wildfire, leaving the latrines reeking of death and despair. One veteran came to me, his face gaunt with hunger, ribs showing through his torn tunic. "Marcus, maybe we backed the wrong horse this time." "Caesar's pulled us through worse," I told him firmly, though my own stomach was cramping with emptiness. "Remember Alesia. Remember the Nervi. Have faith in the man, soldier. He hasn't failed us yet." When the breakout came, we ran like whipped dogs, lost 1,000 good men in one night, including some who'd followed Caesar since Gaul. I saw grown centurions weep as we abandoned our works, tears cutting tracks through the dust and grime on their faces. But Caesar just smiled, that cold smile of his, the one that made you think of winter wolves. "One battle, gentlemen," he said, calm in defeat, brushing dust from his scarlet cloak. "Pompey has won one battle. Let's see how he handles winning a war." Pharsalus, August 9th, 48 BC. Picture the greatest armies Rome had ever fielded, facing each other across a Thessalian plain baked hard by the summer sun. The air shimmered with heat, and you could smell the dust and sweat, the leather and bronze, the fear that clings to men before they die. Pompey had the numbers, 50,000 men to our 22,000. But we had something he didn't. We had 8 years of shared blood and victory. We had Caesar. I could hear Pompey addressing his officers across the field, his voice booming with that old confidence. "Today we restore the Republic. Today Rome remembers that no man stands above the law." Caesar's response to his veterans was different, intimate. He moved among us like a father among his sons, touching shoulders, speaking quietly. His voice carried that peculiar warmth that made you believe you could conquer the gods themselves. "Boys, you see that man across the field? He calls himself Pompey the Great. Today, we teach him what greatness really means." The battle began at dawn. Pompey's cavalry, gorgeous peacocks in their plumed helmets, charged our right flank like they were riding to a triumph. Their horses were sleek and well-fed, their armor polished bright as mirrors. You could smell the oils in their hair, the perfumes they wore to battle like it was a dinner party. They met our fourth line. Boys Caesar had hidden behind the infantry, hand-picked killers with orders to aim for pretty faces. "Thrust, don't slash," I shouted to my men, tasting blood and dust. "Go for their eyes. Make them remember they're mortal." It was slaughter. Those beautiful cavalry boys had never faced veterans who fought like cornered wolves. They broke and ran, leaving Pompey's flank naked as a newborn. The smell of blood and voided bowels filled the air, the honest reek of men dying badly. When Caesar raised his sword for the final charge, I swear the earth itself trembled. "Spare the citizens," Caesar shouted over the din, his voice somehow carrying above the chaos of dying men. "They are Romans still." That was Caesar for you. Even in victory, even drunk on the wine of conquest, he remembered mercy. It's what made men love him. It's also what got him killed. After Pharsalus, Pompey fled to Egypt seeking sanctuary. Poor bastard thought he'd find friends among the Ptolemies. Instead, He found a dagger in his back on a beach near Alexandria. When they brought Caesar Pompey's head, I was there in the tent. Caesar looked at it for a long moment. This thing that had once been his rival, his son-in-law, his enemy. Then he wept. Whether from grief or theater, I never knew, but the tears were real enough, cutting tracks through the dust on his cheeks. That's when she appeared. Cleopatra VII, last pharaoh of Egypt, wrapped in a carpet like a gift for the gods. 21 years old, beautiful as sin, and dangerous as a cobra. I was on guard duty when they unrolled that carpet. The first thing that hit me was the scent, jasmine and myrrh, expensive oils that made your head swim. Then she emerged like some fever dream made flesh, all gold and silk and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. "Great Caesar," she said in that voice like honey over steel, each word precisely chosen, "I bring you the loyalty of Egypt and the wisdom of the Nile." Caesar was intrigued, despite himself. I'd seen him face charging Gauls without blinking, but this slip of a girl had him off balance. "You risk much coming to me like this. Your brother claims Egypt's throne." "My brother is a boy playing with a crown," she replied, rising gracefully from the carpet. Even standing there in our rough military tent, she seemed to belong to a different world, one of marble palaces and ancient secrets. "I am Egypt, Caesar. The blood of Alexander flows in my veins, and the power of the gods rests in my hands." She had him from that first moment. Oh, he tried to play the stern Roman, but I'd seen Caesar conquer nations and never lose his composure. One Egyptian queen reduced him to a lovesick boy. They spent the winter on the Nile while Alexandria burned around them. Political alliance, they called it. The rest of us called it madness. We could smell the smoke from the burning library, even from the palace, and hear the screams of the dying carried on the night wind. When we finally returned to Rome, Caesar celebrated 4 triumphs in 4 days. Gallic gold, Egyptian treasures, prisoners from across the world. The mob went wild for the spectacle. I could smell their excitement, sharp and animal, mixing with the incense and flowers thrown in our path. But in the Senate, men sharpened their knives and whispered of tyranny. From what I heard later, and you hear everything if you keep your ears open in Rome, Cicero's voice rose in the chamber like a clarion call. "How long, conscript fathers? How long will we endure this mockery of our ancestors' virtues? Caesar parades through our streets like a god, while the Republic gasps her last." I'd heard Cicero speak before, remember. That golden voice could make stones weep and cowards fight. When he talked about the old ways, the Republic of our fathers, even hardened centurions would get misty-eyed, thinking about virtues we'd probably never possessed. Cato added his own iron certainty to the debate. Better to die as free men than live as a tyrant's slaves. And there was the rub. Cato meant every word of it. The old bastard would rather see Rome burn than bend the knee to any man. You had to admire that kind of stubborn principle, even when it was about to get everyone killed. They had a point, those stubborn old senators. Caesar was collecting honors like a merchant collects coins. Dictator for life, father of the country, Pontifex Maximus. Every title but king, and even that seemed within reach. I watched him in those final months. The man who'd laughed at danger in Gaul, who'd smiled at defeat at Dyrrhachium, now jumped at shadows. You could smell the paranoia on him like old sweat, sharp and sour. He knew what was coming. We all did. March 15th dawned gray and cold. The air tasted of rain and something else. Something metallic and bitter. I was with Caesar's bodyguard outside the Senate house, or what was left of us. He'd dismissed most of his German guards. Said Romans shouldn't need foreign swords to protect them from other Romans. Fool, noble, magnificent fool. 60 senators in the plot, they said later. 60 men who'd sworn oaths to protect the Republic and decided murder was the only way to keep them. Now, I wasn't there when they planned it. I was just a soldier, and senators don't invite soldiers to their dinner parties. But Rome's a small city in some ways, and secrets have a way of leaking. Slaves see everything, hear everything, and slaves talk to each other when their masters aren't listening. The story that reached us in the barracks was this. Marcus Brutus led them, the great-great-grandson of the Brutus who'd expelled the last king. Handsome, educated, idealistic, everything a Roman senator should be, and about as practical as a marble sword. I'd seen Brutus around the city, always surrounded by other young senators with their perfectly oiled beards and their carefully arranged togas. There was something tragic about him even then. The weight of expectation, the burden of living up to an ancestor's legend. When he walked, he carried himself like a man bearing an invisible crown. This is not murder, my friends. The word was he told the conspirators, passion burning in his voice like a fever. This is surgery. We cut out the tumor before it kills the patient. Crassus was more pragmatic. I'd served under him briefly in Syria, and he was the kind of officer who counted supplies and casualties with equal precision. Pretty words, Brutus. But remember, if we fail, we don't get second chances. Caesar's clemency won't extend to attempted assassination. They were terrified, most of them. Soft men who'd never killed anything larger than a dinner chicken, trying to work up the courage to butcher the most dangerous man in Rome. You could smell their fear in the Senate house that morning, acrid and sharp, like piss and copper pennies. But they'd committed themselves, and commitment, even to madness, has its own terrible momentum. I watched Caesar enter Pompey's theater. Ironic that. The greatest of Rome was to die in a building named for his greatest rival. The morning light filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward him like grasping fingers. The senators clustered around him like vultures around carrion, smiling, bowing, kissing the hand they were about to stain with blood. The air was thick with expensive oils and nervous sweat. One approached with false deference, Tilius Cimber, I learned later. "Great Caesar, we have a petition." Caesar, weary but attentive, replied, "Speak freely, citizens. The Republic's business is always my concern. I should have known then, the way they pressed close, the way their hands kept moving to the folds of their togas. But Caesar trusted them, after everything, after crossing the Rubicon, after civil war, after making himself master of the world. He still believed Romans wouldn't murder him in broad daylight. It started with Cimber grabbing Caesar's toga, a distraction. While Caesar tried to free himself, Casca struck from behind, a coward's blow that opened the floodgates. 23 wounds, they counted later. 23 senators driving home the point that no man, however great, stands above the Republic's law. I was too far away to help, held back by the crowd of senators pressing forward like wolves, sensing blood. But I could see it all. The flash of steel in the lamplight, the spray of red across white marble, the way Caesar's scarlet cloak darkened as it soaked up his life. Caesar fought at first. The old soldier's instincts never die. His fists connected with soft senatorial flesh, and I heard more than one conspirator cry out in pain. But there were too many of them, and their daggers found their mark again and again. Then he saw Brutus approaching with a bloody blade. The noise died away, as if the world itself held its breath. Caesar looked into the eyes of the young man he'd loved like a son, and I saw something break in his face. Not fear, not anger, just disappointment, deep and final as death itself. "Et tu, brute?" he whispered, his voice barely carrying across the sudden silence. "Then false Caesar must..." He pulled his toga over his head, dignity, even in death, and died at the foot of Pompey's statue. The conqueror of Gaul, master of Rome, brought low by frightened men with kitchen knives. The irony would have made him laugh if he'd been alive to appreciate it. Instead, his blood pooled on the marble floor, mixing with the dust and incense and filling the air with that metallic smell that clings to the back of your throat long after the killing's done. The conspirators thought they'd saved the Republic. Poor, deluded fools. They'd just signed its death warrant in Caesar's blood. Within hours, Mark Antony was reading Caesar's will to the mob. Every citizen to receive 75 denarii, Caesar's gardens given to the people forever. The crowd that had cheered the tyrant's death was now howling for the liberator's blood. Murderers! Traitors! Burn their houses. The mob roared, their voices rising like the howl of a wounded beast. You could smell their rage, hot and animal, mixed with smoke from the fires they'd started and the reek of too many bodies pressed together in fury. Brutus and his fellow conspirators fled like thieves in the night, their high principles abandoned for the more practical matter of staying alive. The republic they'd killed to save lasted exactly as long as it took Antony to finish reading Caesar's will. But that's another story. The story of how Caesar's heir, a sickly boy named Octavian, proved more dangerous than Caesar himself ever dreamed of being. I'm getting ahead of myself. Old soldiers do that. We remember the wars, but forget the peace between them. The Republic was dead. Long live. What came next? This was the story of blood and eagles, of a republic that conquered the world only to be devoured by its own ambitions, of men who fought for liberty and learned that power corrupts even the noblest hearts. Crassus the spider died choking on Parthian gold, his wealth worthless in the Syrian sand. Pompey the Great died forgotten on an Egyptian beach, his glory reduced to a severed head in a basket. Brutus and his fellow conspirators fell on their swords at Philippi, their noble dream of restoring the Republic buried with them in Macedonian mud. But Caesar became eternal. Not because he lived, but because he showed the world what one man's will could accomplish when unleashed from all restraint. His name would become a title, whispered by emperors and kings long after the Republic was dust. And Cicero, the voice of the dying Republic, he would meet his end at Antony's command, his eloquent tongue finally silenced by the swords of men who preferred action to argument. The liberty he defended with words would be buried with him in the forum's blood-soaked stones. I am old now. My gladius hangs above my hearth, more memory than weapon, a relic of wars that remade the world. But sometimes, in the evening light, I watch Roman children playing in streets built by Caesar's gold, subjects now where their grandfathers had been citizens. And I remember what we lost. Not just the Republic. That was dying long before we crossed the Rubicon. We lost the dangerous, beautiful illusion that free men could govern themselves, that power could be shared rather than seized, that Rome could rule the world without becoming a tyrant. The eagle that had soared over Gaul and Egypt, that had carried our standards to the ends of the earth, had finally learned to perch on the wrist of a master. Whether that master would prove worthy of our submission, that was a question for the ages yet to come. The Republic was dead. Long live the Empire.